You know, I mean, you think about it, it's like, I guess for most people in our culture, when you see a stone sculpture, and the first way I'd seen stone sculpture, usually was in a memorial type of environment. And that's probably is going to be a standing legacy as a medium. It's a way of memorializing people. You know, your first tombstones were done in marble. You know,
slaves didn't get stones.
No.
They put shells.
They use shells. They use a lot of different things. But for me, you know, you use that as a you use it by knowing the history to an extent. But then it's like when I was growing up, kids would sit around, and we were first generation post-segregation. We would talk about, after learning anything about that time period, we would just jive and chive with each other. Dude, if I could go back in time, I would go back with a laser gun, and I would go on a plantation, I would do this, and I would do that, and I would do this, and I would do that, right? Okay, now it's maybe 7 generations behind me now. You know, I think probably one of the least paid attention to aspects of the Black psychic realm is fantasy. It's fantasy. I think one of the reasons that I'm so attracted to that techno music is because to me, it's not the social realism that you find in hip hop. You know, it's not about telling you about what you did to me. It's really about telling you what you didn't do to me. And that's techno, which you couldn't take away. Most of it's non-lyrical, and it's all music, just music. It's beats, syncopation. You know what I mean? And that's really where my heart wants to dwell. I feel tied to that connection of announcing, of dealing with my black male anger, you know, in some of the pieces as we go for. I have to deal with that, because that's about being whole, and it's about keeping sane. But where my heart really wants to dwell is in that other place where I'm just human. You know, you gotta have both. You gotta have both. You gotta have both.
No, we'll go back.
And it was great. You know, it's great because that piece right here, it kind of brings it back. It really brings it back. It really brings it back. And it was funny, but I was just saying, I was talking, and I said, you know, just talking about when I say techno, I love Negro. I love the word Negro, and I use it a lot in my titles. The title is called
Transfiguration
of the Techno Negro, and again, that's a shout out to that part of the imagination that I see that hasn't been getting a lot of attention. And that flows, you know. Somebody who I know flows in that world, like I said, you know, she flew in that world, you know. And one day, what's going on literally in the literal world, with writing, what happened in the music world, the audio world, in the visual world, we all birthed in the same stew, and they all happening simultaneously. Unfortunately, our society separates us, and we often don't know what each other's doing. But we are, you know, we're progressing towards that space. They might call it sci-fi. You know, that's a really whack way of using what it is. But it's us propelling ourselves into another world at another time. This information, this computer, all this technology that's coming on, how we take it in as opposed to other cultures, as opposed to being in this world, in America, it's very different. And so, like, you constantly want to, having been brought up in techno music, first of all, oftentimes it's thought of being, because right now it's mostly a European adaptation. But for us, we talk about it, most of our family worked in the plant. Everybody worked in the plant. Grandma worked in the plant, uncles, aunts worked in the plant. All you knew was, in a sense, if your parents didn't work in the plant, their family worked in the plant. The plant. Exactly. And the town Inkster that I grew up in was actually, Henry Ford made this town, and it's like the company town. That whole kind of economic dynamic. Okay, God bless you. But for us, Inkster was built where, you could go, you would work the line, and he would give you a high interest loan to buy a home and a car, and you would work the rest of your life paying off the car and the house, and you lived in this small town, Inkster. Well, anyway, one of the things that we talked about when we talked about the origins of that music is that our mothers were pregnant while they were in the plants. So as fetuses, what did you hear? You heard the bing, bong, bing, bing, bang, 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 bang. It's a colorful tale. Flow with me if you can. If not, it's okay. But that's something that we kind of ingested, and you see it in that music, and it just produces a different dynamic. It wasn't until I understood in Zimbabwe, until I had a chance to work around a multiplicity of sculptors working at the same time, the dynamic of rhythm and sound when working in stone. Like when you have 18, 19 students or acolytes or apprentices, and everybody's bing, bing, boom, boom, bing, bing, boom, boom, bing, or it would change, and you would be surprised how one would influence with one rhythm, and then another would pick it up. It doesn't matter what you're creating, but you realize that the sound itself, it releases something in the body, it releases something in the mind. The mind is changed by the sound. What that change is, I'm going to find out before I leave this place. But it's something. Let's go, Alex.
Now what you know about the green and green?
I spent a lot of time in Chicago, because where I went to school I'm right in the middle of Chicago, Detroit. And many of the people that went to my school are from the Chi. So, in college, you would go home with them on the weekends, and you would spend time there. And
It's not a theater district.
Yeah, I know. I wish I would have been able to see it come down.
And what was Kabinji Green?
It was in Chicago. Housing project.
It was in the middle of downtown, basically. And built around it, they started building the theater district. And what we know is Crate and Barrel. It used to be down the street, and it used to have crates and barrels, and you bought glasses and things out of these barrels, and there were little shops and delis, and I lived there for 14 years. I spent a lot of time over back in Greeny Green.
Major public housing development. It's supposed to be the largest in the country, and they actually demolished it. So it has a significance for a lot of African American families growing up in that culture, and it was actually considered a culture.
It was a
to live there. It was a town. It was bigger than some people's towns.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it.
There's documentaries on that housing project.
Yeah.
If you look that up, there's documentaries. That's how big this is.
Yeah.
It was, I had a chance to just, to hang out there and to see youth coming in and out and families talking. But, it wasn't the first time that I had visited, there's Cass Corridor in Detroit. There's a lot of these old, the Martian projects in New York. But for me, what it was about announcing in a way in the world, when you think about that quote-unquote lifestyle, not necessarily lifestyle, but the culture. I thought about it and I said, you know what? There's always good to be found, and honesty and love. And I thought about in Greek mythology, they talk about the oracle. And the oracle, and the concept of an oracle is given not just to a person or a deity, but it's also given to physical places. And I said, there's always going to be that one old lady or old man who represents in a very esoteric way the priestess or the priest. And whether they be Christian or whatever they are, they're able to transmit this whatever it is that we need to be able to get through that experience. And so, of course, they need acknowledgement. And we need to use to fantasize about them. And like, you know, I'm really, really hot on us creating our own deities. But even outside of the African dynamic, I think that it's time for us to create that part of our existence. And I think it makes it also the High John the Conqueror and all these individuals, you know, who have we need to, I feel like I can, again, it goes back to memorial and doing it that way.
There's two of these right there.
Those two pieces, again, this was like an oracle, like the one we have for Cabrini Green. The second one is an oracle for the Marshall Project in New York City. Another project, housing project, very similar, also with the same sort of legacy, also on the chopping block. And so in a way, it's kind of like, you know, I realize that the way the urban setting is now, especially with the changes that are going on in our real estate now and our economics, that these places will be gone, and thousands of us have come. This, oh my God, it's just like, you know, if you had a chance to acknowledge and understand what every boat that came from the continent of Africa, because you know, oh, I know those names, but no, yet we know these names of the people. Like for us that migrated up north, our families, those places they're important points. They are drop-off points in a lot of ways. And so, you know, you really want to salute those places, no matter what anybody says. We make our own decisions about their validity or what they represent to us.
Are those letters?
This piece right here? Actually no. But I utilize it's the same concept in the second piece. I'm sorry, let's go back to the second piece, Alex.
This is, no.
Yeah, this piece right here, this is where I want to go. But for me, it's, I'm also very interested in syntax, and in syntax, language, you're going to have symbols, right? And so for this piece, I really have, and it's very insightful. I've tried to use my own configuration, my own matrix, if you want to call that, of shapes and lines to create my own syntax. And so the way it's set up, it's very much like that. Now, the insight, well, not the insight, but the basis behind that one is my mother's family's from Oklahoma. They're those people, they call them the Black Indians. All right? And they migrated to Detroit. But I would spend my summers in Oklahoma. And so I was always exposed to Native American culture. And it was usually always in a really positive way. You know, I had almost an exoticism with the history until I got old enough to kind of read more about the relationships and knowing how our communities got along or didn't get along. But for that time period as a youth, it was just a different space. And so my mother's family, there was a burial ground near where they lived, where they buried both Native people and people of African descent. And of course, they're not being a young child, because you know the Bible just starts in college. It's, you know, you're not talking about all the years before one gets to that point where you really secretly always know that you got something inside that's really bothering you, you know, or it's really pushing you towards something. And I'd always been attracted to totems. Totems, the concept of totem, the concept of using the third dimension to create a language to communicate. And so when you look at totems, particularly of the Native American groups of the Pacific Northwest, you know, you've got, you know by that first entity, the family structure, where is the hierarchy. You get all this information in a really complete composite form that's there for everyone to see it. And so, and that was the influence behind this work.
It's interesting that you talked about the bio. Yesterday I had the pleasure of talking to William T. Williams and Mel Edwards. And one of the things I think that is important is that they write their own stories, as you should write your own story. So it's in your voice. Because when we go back, my granddaughter comes along this way and she says this piece, well, what about him? She'll see your bio, but she won't have your real story.
Right.
And I think it's important for artists to find a way to do it. Now, Mel Edwards was interested, and he said, let them write it. Let somebody else write it. Well, you tell them what to write. William T. Whitney said he's already gathered notes. I talked to George Smith, he says he is writing his. And I think it's important that you touch on that. You read biographies and autobiographies, you should write one.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And it's interesting because I had a chance I met all three of those artists. And they all, there's personality issues in it. If you know who I'm talking about, they have their own personality issues. I can totally see George and William like that. And Mel is he's very old school, you know. And I think for our generation, yeah, you do take that on, that responsibility. That's something that you have to be able to, you know, you're in charge of your own narrative in a lot of ways. Yes, yes. Well, you know what? You're gonna be confronted with it whether you want to or not. Because if you don't do it, then someone else will do it, and then you'll have to correct them.
Your voice, and just like her wonderful story, I want my granddaughter to know. What's this wonderful woman's story? Because she's 5 years old, and the only way I can keep her quiet is with a pad and some crayons and some craft. But if she doesn't know that women like you, she may know superficially because, you know, we get these stories and pieces, but if you write the story or have the story written by whomever you choose, she has a full story and she'll know, oh, she liked to draw when she was 5, and I liked to draw when I was 5.
Yeah.
But that is so true. But that's also like another job for the artist. I mean,
Yeah.
you're already
Well, that's
shouldering this.
Well, that's what Mel Evans said.
Well, you know, the thing about it is
He
that
plans to do it.
That's why we need to communicate with people who write and the historians. I mean, we need to communicate with each other. We need
Because
to
it's
embrace
make
each
it more
other.
holistic.
yeah. You know what? If that were possible, that would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. No, for me, I opted on the route of I've worked with several writers, but the individual who wrote my essay, I was very conscious of who wrote it, his background. You know, he's from Detroit. You know, and what made it different for him, what really clicked for me was that he's a jazz musician, as opposed to an art critic. I felt like his use of language and is so different. You know, and one of the things that he was able to make a correlation with my work that I know that most art historians could not do. He understood syncopation. He understood the concept of rhythm.
So there's your story in your voice.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
didn't have to
Finish that thought.
You know, so when
finish that.
when we sat down to come together on this essay, originally the essay was written for an exhibition that I had in New York, but when we came together to, you know, for the book, he was able to, I was able to, I don't want to use the word control, right? But I can say that he was ultra sensitive to things that I felt that I had to say. But oftentimes an artist just doesn't have all of that together to be able to give it to you. You know, like, the space that we create here is not always the space that's, it's if you can see a cook when a cook is in the kitchen and the cook asks you to come and eat and you got stuff everywhere, you got this going that way, it may not be as appetizing a feat as if I took it from the kitchen and put it on the table. And so maybe what that is about is getting it to the table so that people can digest it. I'm not always, I have such respect for people who write that I realize that that's not my primary gift, right? Now I can attempt, and I'm not a bad writer, but I can't be not open to letting somebody do what they do well. And if you sit down, there's a lot of people who are out who would love the opportunity, and then it becomes, you know what? It can never be too much magic in a project. And then that person, they bring their own magic, you know, and they may be able to see something in you important. You can concur. What you do is not for you. You're just a conduit.
That's right.
You bring it from here
That's right.
to here. Other than that, that's why you can sell your work. You don't feel the same level of attachment because it's not, your whole job is to continue. Where's this path? Continue, question, continue. You know, I'm not always, I can sit here and I'm blowing up like I'm right now, but what what I'm saying? Is ultimately what you take from each individual piece is what you take based on your life experience and your exposure. And that's something I would never want to tamper with. I would never want you to take home something and shape it in such a way where you couldn't look outside your own experience and love it for what you love it for. Right? Again, this is another piece, again, going back into that Judeo-Christian upbringing, wondering about the unknown. I think this is the first time I had ever seen, and I'm sure most of us experience it that way too, but when you see the unconscious mind take over, to me it was, like seeing it was the equivalent of seeing somebody, a verbal doodle, And really it was funny, but also understanding that there's like really listening to the words coming out of the mouths and realizing that there were similarities in words that were coming.
This is unknown tongues.
Speaking in tongues. People are speaking in tongues. Like, what is that? The first place that, when I went with Operation Crossroads to Zimbabwe, the place that we worked at first, and what we did is that we provided we would work during the day and we were building an annex to a secondary school. It was a first mission school in Southern Africa. Talk about a transformative experience. When I looked at the history of the place itself, mind-boggling. The spirits that dwelled there, just so unsettled. So unsettled. They would, I'm so sorry I lost my train of thought there. I want to be honest with you. Yeah, let's move on. It'll come back.
This is at the entrance when you first come in. It's normally against this wall here, but it's at the entrance.
Okay, this piece is called Shadow Matter Entity. And lately, one of the things that I've really tried to expose I've been interested in is quantum physics. And this was, at the time I was reading a book by a guy named Reginald Crossley, who's a doctor actually here in DC. And he wrote a book called The Voodoo Quantum Leap. A very, very fascinating book looking at African spirituality, specifically diasporan spirituality in voodoo, and comparing it to quantum physics. And stunning piece of work. It was at that time, my wife and I are close friends. The husband is a drummer. He's a voodoo drummer. So we would always get invited to go to ceremonies, and we would go, and just incredibly wonderful environment. But that experience, along with reading the book, it really opened up that quantum reality to me, that duality, the parallel universe theory, realizing that African spirituality had already given a space for that which could not be talked about. One of the things about in Zimbabwe, and when people ask me about it, the first thing I always bring up AIDS. And one of the things that I noticed that people, they weren't scared of dying. The people weren't scared of dying. I don't know how people, it doesn't bug people right here. I think our culture really is all about staying as young as possible and living as long as you can. And I think for them it wasn't like that. Death was okay. It was a part of life. And so understanding that, again, these would be, shadow matter entities would be forms or things that exist in the parallel universe. Sometimes they can be good things, sometimes they can be bad things, but they influence our reality in this plane. Okay? So it would be a mirror image, and sometimes it could be an image of the self in the parallel reality. Okay? I'm still in discovery about what these things are, so forgive me if I'm not able to transmit in totality what I read. But it's that kind of thing that, you know, you gotta keep going after.
Question, this is rhyolite with grout.
Yeah.
Now, is there some correlation with why you selected rhyolite, this particular mineral, to depict this shadow entity?
You know what? Actually, there isn't. Because I didn't, that was the first time I worked with rhyolite. And rhyolite is usually used in exterior buildings, but it was a really, really important stone in the Navajo community. And I had read about it, and I saw it, and you know, our medium is just dying at such a fast rate. Initially, when I came to New York 10 years ago, there were several places that you could buy rough stone or alluvial stone. And presently, there's one place in the city of New York that you can get it. And so, like, coming across odd materials, odd minerals, odd stones, is really a luck thing. And so when I saw the rock, it was just immediate marriage. I just loved it. I loved the way it felt. It reminded me of limestone, but it still had the banding. It reminded me of New Mexico. When you see like the banding in the hills in New Mexico, near I don't know if it was outside of Santa Fe, you know that area, the petrified forest, you should see this banding. And so it was in a smaller version, that's what it reminded me of. It's a beautiful rock. It's a beautiful